followed by a day in the life, drug tracking. So this will be the very basic nuts and bolts of how we keep track of supplies and what we're doing. Basically, just our step process. So all these numbers are approximate, but I will give a brief rundown of how we do our stepwise collection and analysis. So first, we or our harm reduction partner will collect a sample from an individual, and they will record the information associated with that. And that typically takes about 2 minutes. I will give in a later slide an example of what a sample bag that we use looks like and the information recorded for that. We will then gather our equipment and the instrument, which is, I have a toolbox here that is essentially fully stocked, but I will go through in greater detail how we stock it. And that takes about 5 to 10 minutes depending on how low your supplies are in the toolbox. We will input the sample information into our data collection spreadsheet. That typically takes about 2 minutes. It also is assuming you are comfortable doing this. The first time I gathered equipment in the instrument would be like 30 minutes. But a lot of this just comes with practice and having a process. Next, we will perform the test strip. I think Tracy said most people here already know how to do that, so it can take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, depending if you have to do it at 2 different dilutions. We will then perform the FTIR scan, which once you become comfortable and have your methods done, you can do it in about 5 minutes. You will fill out the confirmatory testing sheet, which actually do have the blank one here, which is what we send off to our confirmatory lab. I will also go through this in more information later. This takes about 2 minutes, not a ton of info. We don't also fill out all the boxes, but Tracy there. We will then package the sample and mail the envelope to our partner lab. And then at a later point in time, this is all that needs to happen kind of in one sitting, and then this can happen later, which is the FTIR analysis. So once you have completed your scan, you can then analyze it via the software. Next, you can report the preliminary results, which takes about 5 minutes to send an email, depending on how you report it. Then we will receive the GCMS results from our current partner lab, drugs data. It takes about 2 weeks by the time we put it in the mail and then receive our confirmatory results. And then we will report those results back to our harm reduction groups that we work with. So that's our general stepwise process of going from collecting the sample to fully outputting what we know. So first, this is kind of just an Excel or Google sheet that I made to make sure everything is completed for each individual site we go to. So for example, I will start with Manit. On October 28th, we plan to go to Manit, Becca and I, and about a week before I prepared the toolbox to make sure it was all ready to go and that everything was all set for that particular trip. We will then, on the same day that we're there, we will record the sample info. Qualtrics is another way we record info for police departments, and because Manit is a harm reduction organization, we don't have to do that there, but for our partners, we do. Next, we will run our FTS and the FTIR while we are there. And then at the end of the day, we'll send out our confirmatory testing envelopes. And then later, we will do the FTIR analysis, and I will input the results. So I typically tell the harm reduction partners that we work with that it takes about 24 to 48 hours for me to look at all the scans and then upload them or let them know of the results. You can do it in as little as 5 minutes for an individual sample, but depending on where you're analyzing it, it can take more or less time. So,
cool, quick question.
Yes.
Do you guys send off all of your samples for confirmatory testing?
We do. Unless there is, yes, but unless there is too little sample for even that, which I will get into later, but as long as there's anything visible, we will send it to them.
Yeah, but if you don't have the, like, it's expensive, so if you don't have the money, like, we have had different times where we've had more money than others. When we had less money, we would just send any overdoses or, like, things that we were really concerned about. Like, definitely send those, and any pills. We would send 20 up to 25% random sample of the rest. So we would send, I don't know, maybe a third of the stuff that we did to, like, cut costs because it can be expensive. And, like, I know that I'm pretty sure when Claire did stuff, it meth, she'd be like, okay, this is meth. Like, we don't need to send it out. Or it's like purely cocaine. Like, if things look pretty normal on the scan, it can be up to your discretion, and especially if you have a lower budget that you're working with.
Good question. So once I've done the analysis and I can upload the results, I will send an email to our premium partner to let them know how you can look here to see the results. And then about 2 weeks later, we will get the GCMS results received. At this time, presentation, we have received them as of 11/22, which was a little sad. So sometimes it takes longer than 2 weeks, sometimes it's quicker than 2 weeks. It really kind of just depends on how busy drug data is. But once we have received all the results, we will then put them into our spreadsheet, into the spreadsheet for our community organizations to see, and then we'll let them know. So this is kind of our process, and I just need this in my own brain to keep track of, like, okay, who have I told, what have I done, what needs to be done, and so on and so forth. So I have done this myself. Stuff to bring every visit is the instrument, filled out toolbox, the Opus laptop and charger, envelopes, an extra laptop for data entry, which might come a phone with the app at a later point in time, water and alcohol bottles, and a notebook. And to keep this straight,
Question.
Yes.
The Opus laptop.
Yes.
I know that some programs are not using, didn't purchase the Opus, they're just using their regular laptop.
Okay.
Do you have any recommendations around?
Do you have the Opus software?
Yes.
Oh, so as long as you have an Opus software on a laptop and you're able to connect to the router, that will be fine.
I need to look at the scan, because I said it to you, you sent it to me, like, is there a way to do that without paying them more money?
Is a way to do it. I believe when you purchase Opus software, you are able to download that specific serial package onto 5 computers.
Oh, for real?
I believe so. Because I don't think they expect you to do all the analysis on one computer.
Yeah.
That is my understanding. I don't know if they've changed policy.
That's what they told us.
Did they
Like,
change policy?
in like a month ago.
Oh.
Really? Great.
Yeah.
So you can get on.
Now I just gotta figure out if I pay the CD or something.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cool.
So this is how we keep track of what we need to bring every visit. Just the same things listed, and then the initial poll of who's going to pick it up or bring it. For example, for the BNHC visit, when we saw Allison and Kelly, I accounted for. I said I will get all these, but I just haven't gotten to the office yet to pick them up with my car. So this is how we keep track. Toolbox breakdown. It is also here. If anyone wants to get hands-on and just fiddle around within it. But this is all the supplies. So we have fentanyl strips, Kim wipes, the airbags. And if anyone has any questions on what any of these are, please tell me. Plastic cups, cut up pieces of tinfoil, about maybe a quarter of an inch by a quarter of an inch, approximately. Stamps, mail envelopes. Envelopes, we typically keep a few extra in the toolbox itself, but because this toolbox is a little more compact, I actually keep it with the laptop, but you can do whichever works for you. Small, medium, large gloves, depending on who's using gloves, you can decide what sizes you need. Small plastic bags. These are especially very helpful for when you have pills, because as you will see, you cannot you will need a mortar and pestle. And instead of the pill flying everywhere and getting dust everywhere, you can put it in a small sample bag to crush it up and kind of remove a bit of contamination. So those are very helpful. Bubble wrap is if you're dealing with cookers, which we deal with a lot in Lawrence. They're the safest way to send them to the confirmatory lab is to bend them flat if you can, and then wrap a piece of bubble wrap around them.
The real best way though is if you have a lot of stuff to just put in a package, like a box, and mail it off, because like the cooker can break through the envelope and then there's like random stuff in the mail. So if you have a bunch of stuff, and even if you have a bunch of samples, it could be more cost effective if you have your own boxes to ship them. So you can ship them however you want, but yeah.
But if you only have one and you don't want a paper box, you put the cooker in a little bag, wrap it in bubble wrap, and then put this bag in this bag.
I don't want to be that person. I just have a question. So like we've been just sending in like just samples of the actual drug itself.
Yep.
Under what circumstances do you think would you send a cooker instead of just trying to scrape the residue out of the cooker?
When there is extremely little. Okay. So that is a good question. If you can scrape the residue and you think you have enough to send to them, then you can analyze it, that's ideal. But it's whenever it's either extremely difficult to get off the cooker, or you don't need to be able to send them enough to get a good quantity.
So, well, I guess at some point we'll just show like what is enough to send.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. But I can answer that now. So these scoops are 1 milligram and 5 milligram scoops each end. So ideally, it also depends on how dense the material is, but that's generally a good estimate. The larger hole is, or the larger scoop is for the 5 milligram sample. That is approximately how much drugs data likes.
5 milligrams?
5 milligrams. They will take 10, that's also good, especially if they have to do the test multiple times on their end, but they like at least 5. They can do as little as 1, it's just really hard for them, and their results might not be as accurate. So they're generally asking for about 5. And then for the FTIR, you typically want about a grain of rice. I will talk more about that, especially in the hands-on tomorrow. But
Where do we get scoops from?
Amazon.
Amazon.
For real?
For real.
Oh my god,
And
Well, like vintage small spoon. I'm like, okay.
yeah, it might be the next slide. It might be a few slides later. But all these materials, we will have a link for where to purchase. Hopefully, we convenient, especially people just starting up.
We also use a scale, a little direct scale, also on yeah. There's a yellow one on here.
Tape I've actually never used. It was just in there from my predecessor, but if you want it, it is there. The small scoops that we just talked around. We do pH testing. Every single sample we've ever done has come back as 7, sometimes 8, which makes a lot of sense. Being pH neutral and the majority of the samples water. But Tracy asked us to do it, so we do it. Next, dental tools are going to be your best friends. Everyone will get to touch these tomorrow, but they are by far the most effective way to scrape stuff out of the cooker, scoop sample out of a bag, or do whatever you need to do. Dental tools are extremely helpful. A Sharpie, for marking purposes, scissors for cutting open bags, magnifying glass if you have a really small amount of sample and you want to give an accurate depiction of the color, and if it's crystal, powders, so on and so forth. For pestle, as I mentioned, for crushing pills, and then lastly, Narcan for taking crushing. But this is generally everything you will need to do your scan. And all the items in black need to be replaced or like replenished after you go to like 1 or 2 sites, depending on how stocked you keep your toolbox. So once you get low on, then I'll show you good for that. But the bottom 6 are open. And this is how we keep track of how stocked toolbox is. Just for peace of mind, because running out of fentanyl test strips when you only have like 2 samples left is not fun. So I just have a quick color code to keep track, and Beck and I only use small and medium gloves, so in this case we only keep the small and mediums in there. If we have someone come along that needs larges, we will make enough grabs up. And these are approximate quantities that fit nicely in that, and we have never run out with when we have an ideal quantity with us at a given site. And then just a quick side note, we do have a supplies tab of these items that purchase more when they are running low. So if we notice we're running low on deterra bags, we will then just provide more, which is helpful. This was the links. I will send out this PowerPoint at the end of probably tomorrow, probably at the end of the day when everyone adjourns for the training, and hopefully, I mean, obviously you can go buy Sharpies and scissors, but I will send a link with specifically what we have. So
The magnifying glass, what would you
use it for? Or
Yeah.
if you have a really small amount of residue and you're unsure if it's like brown or black, you want to get like really close. Just like kind of mostly colors, sometimes crystal size. Don't use it too often, to be honest, but it's nice to have.
What about the benzo strips? How, when would you need or use those? I've never used it.
So honest answer, I have never had it. But benzo strips, as Tracy noted, were, if you need them, we currently don't need them based on what we're seeing in the Massachusetts drug supply, but if you see them definitely in the drug supply where you are, they might be a nice addition to keep in your toolbox and use. I think you might have to get a better understanding of what's actually out there first before you start testing everything for benzos.
Hey, hope, do you guys use them?
Yeah, with the FTIR, it's a little tougher to pick up on pills, benzos, so the benzo strips definitely come in handy just to know whether or not they have the active ingredient in them.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, we always use them on any pills that are pressed. Thank you.
Collecting samples, I think I mentioned what we see. I'll start with baggies because those are typically the easiest to work with. A baggie of powder or crystal. This is actually kind of like an ideal quantity. Next, we have a whole and a part of a pill. Definitely better to have a whole pill, but we accept and crush and evaluate parts of pills. One thing to note is the chocolate chip cooking effect of fentanyl in test pills, which is when you press fentanyl into a pill, it won't evenly disperse throughout the entire pill. It will go like chocolate chips in a cookie. So crushing an entire pill is also the best process, but it's not ideal for returning to a user if they want their pill back. So that is another part of the process where I would always say take the whole pill, crush the whole pill, and then send it out for the confirmatory testing, and then get rid of the pill. But it's obviously going to depend on if you have to return the pill. So if you have to cut a pill in half and then crush just half and get back out, you can do that as well. It just isn't ideal. We see a lot of these in Western Mass, wax folds with stamps on them, typically for heroin and fentanyl. And then another two are once-use hookers and once-use cons. And it's very, very important that they are once-use hookers and once-use cons, because if you receive a hooker that has been used 3 or 4 times with different things, you're going to suspect, oh, there's fentanyl and the cocaine and the meth and the, like so on and so forth, which is not an accurate depiction of what is actually out there. So making sure to ask the individual if it is once used is a key point. Otherwise, we will freak out with what we see, which we have seen. We've seen a sample from a hooker come back with like 10 different substances, and there's no way this was all in one thing. But reporting that is.
Yeah, and if somebody does a speedball or something, like they purposefully did cocaine and heroin together, that's really helpful to indicate so that we know they did heroin and cocaine together. So that's helpful to know. Like gathering information, which I think Cole will talk about, is like so helpful and important for context and like just, yeah, it's really important. Go ahead.
And then how much sample? Typically, we like to receive about 1 grain of rice. That's about how much we'll get through all our testing purposes. Yeah. We can work with less. Another thing that we have done, just for a quick side note, is if there is extremely little sample that there's not enough to get an accurate scan on the FTIR, we will just send it for confirmatory testing, which is not ideal, but that is another option that you can do because you need more sample for the FTIR testing than you do for the confirmatory testing. This is what it looks like. It'll have a sample ID number. We do a 4-digit code, and then, for example, for Procton Neighborhood Health Center, We do B and C, so a 3-letter code underscore the 4-digit sample ID number, just to keep all the samples straight. Data collection, what the substance was submitted as, or what the individual reported it to be, where you got it. It can also just be the town if that's all the information you have. And then the other info, which is what Becca was just mentioning, is very, very important. How did it feel? Did they like it? Any notable aspects? And this can help a lot with testing and identification. So for a quick side story, for one Broxton sample, there was a sample that made an individual feel extremely sleepy. And we were like, oh, that's interesting. That's not the intended effect. So upon initial looking at the scans, we immediately saw that xylazine, which is a veterinary sedative, and it has been increasing as of late as a cut. So that user experience helped corroborate us seeing xylazine in that sample. So any user info or other info that you're able to get is always extremely helpful. And then a quick note. So this is our current process for receiving and collecting samples. But in the future, communities will be able to use the Street Check app, which we'll get into later. But ideally, these sample bags will have a QR code and can create unique identifiers instead of this sample ID followed by a number series. Yeah, that might be talked about more later, but that was just a quick thing.
And one quick question. I know you said like initially you need grain of rice. You noticed that in some samples, the initial scan that you get, the initial signal, is it doesn't matter, like, because I'm sure we'll get like more into this with the hands-on, but just how you get that initial signal to be higher, even though you don't need much of a sample.
So you're saying like you have enough to fully cover the crystal?
Yeah.
You have sufficient quantity, but it's still like just very little.
Yeah, but you can't get that initial signal to get as high as you want to get a sufficient scale.
Gotcha. That is a good question. I've seen that as well. And short answer, we can talk about this more tomorrow, but that probably has to do more with the substance itself, and there might not be anything you can do about it. Which is not great to hear, because obviously you're not going to be able to see a good scan and get a good answer, but it kind of depends on the substance. As you've seen, like some substances can show very well.
Like you need next to nothing, you'll get a high scan.
Yeah. So, kind of varies substance to substance.
Question about the bag. Are you worried about people, not this bag, sorry, on the previous slide, are you worried about people reusing bags? Because you said once used because once used condoms, like could people in the community like reuse their bags? So the bags might have had fentanyl in it before and now it has 15 in it.
That's a possibility. But
Unless they personally use it, they're packaging it for sale, chances of them reusing the bag.
Yeah. Quicker than gotten definitely, but like especially like in class and like we get cellophane baggies, so like they're tied, so like once you open them, they're very hard to reuse and it would make sense.
People develop
They do long term.
save patents for when they're sick.
Right.
Would anyone like to do a live action data collection? Well, someone could be a drug sample collector. Are you filling out bags? Someone else could be a drug sample donator. I'll call you.
Role play.
Oh, I'm not doing it. Someone else come up too.
I'll be going.
Thanks.
Yes.
Is the sample bag back there?
I don't know. In here? I don't know what this is. Where would it be?
I thought I placed it back there.
More direction? In this laptop bag thing or not? Sorry.
No, you're good.
You want to use a piece of paper?
Yeah, we're good.
What is that? What are we doing?
The sample bag.
Which one?
Yeah.
Yeah, or fine. Yeah, they're crazy.
Do you have paper? You need some?
I need paper.
Oh, yeah, finish.
We'll use this.
Okay. I mean, I forget, like, did you have the, I don't know, offhand, like, what we. Oh, it's right there. Yeah. Oh, alright.
Could use.
Captain obvious. Yeah. Alright, go ahead. Yeah, you have the paper.
Am I the?
Okay, you're gonna need the selector.
Alright,
I have some drugs for you to test.
great, let's test. What's your code?
SRMC. What's my code again?
Did they work?
6585.
Just wanted to get it.
Do you want to play that game? Sorry.
If you don't mind me asking, did you purchase some drugs around here? Mm-hmm. Okay. Right here on the wall?
Mine is the street address.
Yeah. What's your deal?
You know, look like a
And what did they sell to you at?
So, Betty. That is pure fentanyl. Oh my god. Pure fentanyl.
Sure, so it's not pure heroin.
He's got the fire!
Because heroin is out here. Of course. And did you try it?
Yeah, and I OD'd on it. I got a little bit left in the bag.
Okay. And outside of ODing, did it give you any other weird effects that you can remember?
No, but I never OD'd, so I don't know what the fuck happened.
Alright, and I believe that's all I need. Do you want to wait here for the sample, or do you want to give me a telephone number to call you?
I'm gonna wait.
Okay. Give me a couple seconds, we'll let you know.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So what did he write down?
What was your question, Becky?
What did he write down, or Kenny, what did you write down from that?
I wrote down her code, I wrote down where she got it, that she OD'd from it, and I believe that's it. And if she had any weird experiences with the drug, I would have wrote that down as well, but just the basic information that.
Yeah, that's good. I think we're saying pure fentanyl and stuff too. You can write that kind of
Like
stuff
experience
down.
notes.
Yeah. I didn't write it down just because I hear it so much.
Yeah, it's helpful. Yeah, I know. Everybody thinks they got the good stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if anybody wants to write down like what they got, they're gonna say that good shit, fire, or pure fentanyl. And I'm like, no.
Our data question is slightly different. I think I have like a couple of other things. Like one of the things that we collect that I don't think on there is like race and ethnicity data. And gender, just to, so like we're trying to make sure that like as we roll this out that like not just white folks are just fucking accessing it, you know what I mean? Because like historically Northwest in Boston and Massachusetts, like we've just been not serving BIPOC communities well, so we're keeping a close eye on it. So that's just one thing that we might want to consider.
Yeah, and just another comment actually, like all this stuff that Cole's sharing is what we do, and you can do whatever you want with it. You don't have to do it. Like the AHOPE has a code for people, which is like really wonderful if you want to get codes for people so you can report their info back. We don't do any of that, right? We just report to our people, but our model is a little bit different. Like you're going to be interacting with people. So take what you want from this. You don't have to, Cole shared a lot of really wonderful stuff, but if you don't want to use it, you don't have to use it. If you want to tweak it that works best for your program, feel free to do this. This isn't exactly prescriptive, it's just kind of like suggestions.
Yeah.
So.
And our code process is more so for like people that come in, drop it off, and then leave.
Right.
And they come back 2 weeks later and say, "Oh, I gave you some drugs. What
Yeah.
happened to it?" So we can just directly identify who
That's
gave
what I was
us
gonna say.
what.
Like, we have to have codes for everyone we serve,
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
so everyone has an identifier.
Yeah, great.
You guys aren't asking these questions though. It's like all of the services you're working with, they're asking the question,
Yes.
writing this information down.
Yes. And then we will take this back from. So we don't actually
See the
collect. Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, the app, I should pull this back up, the app that we will be showing later, if anyone here, some folks have met with the app developer, he likes to use the word data-driven quite frequently. All that means is we can customize it for you. So we can customize the funnel that you will use if you use the app. So if AHOPE wants that type of demographic information, we can have a screen for you to take that demographic information down while you're collecting samples. So we'll talk about that later.
And those are all customizable for each different.
For each site,
Each
exactly.
site, yes.
Yep.
So you can get exactly what you want. Yeah, exactly. So there was a specific question for this, so I thought I'd make 3
Thank
slides.
you.
Yeah. So this is. Do you guys have a carrying case or no?
We do, yeah.
Okay.
But if you buy it from River, they don't like offer it to you. They're like, oh, it's not included. Like, how the fuck is it not included? What? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to like hold it, like bring it around,
Yeah.
carrying it?
Like put it in
Like
a
a
baby
child?
horn. Like
I think
I would put it in a baby
for
horn.
how often they like sell it as, oh, it's super portable and small and compact.
Yeah, it is.
Like,
Like, we had to like ask for it, and then like we didn't have any money.
How much is the
But
case?
it's
$100.
It's gotta be $600. I was gonna say, it's gotta be $300. You said $600 for the case?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, it has to be.
So, as you will learn as you become more acquainted with the FTIR, it can be a very finicky instrument, so treating it gently will help it work smoothly. I don't know if this has been the case for you guys today as much or.
Not much finicky, and we don't move it either.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
I would literally like that.
Yeah.
We would like to, but we're also just scared of breaking the fucking thing because we do a one-time funding thing, so we're just scared to break it. But we need to figure out how to bring them home because we need to serve our community.
Exactly. So for Becca and I, we drive around like 45 minutes to 2.5 hours with it just in one of our trunks. So putting it in the case and being very gentle when you place it on the table and just being careful with it all around. Someone said the analogy of please treat it like moving a new TV. That's generally a good thing. Roll versus carry. I carry it because I think it's better for the instrument, but it is fine to roll it over or roll it in the case, wheels, and it's like luggage.
Can you show us how to pack that tomorrow? Can you show us how to pack that into the case tomorrow?
Oh yeah, okay. If you are going to roll it, try not to roll it over bumps. Generally place it in the case. And then temperature control, this is more if you're going from site to site, especially in the winter. Don't leave it in your car overnight and like get to like 10 degrees. It won't break it, but I mean, it could break it, but try to keep it in a temperature controlled area. Like, room temp is fine, don't be super finicky, just like above 40 and below 90.
I could not imagine leaving a
And then the other thing, be sure to lift from the bottom. That's just a side note. As you can see, there's a little handful hopefully underneath it. Lifting it from top A is a good way to slip and drop it, but it's also better for the instrument. So it's delicate in some ways, but it's also very sturdy. Like you don't have to be like afraid to like move the anvil and press down. Just like treat it and it'll last.
Doesn't come with shit.
Before I was here, an instrument broke.
It's super expensive to fix, like so expensive. They do have a whatever plan with them, maintenance plan, but it's not. We've decided that it wasn't worth the money. You can decide that on your own. It's pretty expensive and it's yearly. But also breaking it is pretty expensive. So be gentle. I can't tell you what happened, but if you drop it from a height, that's definitely not great. Supposedly the case from like a few inches or whatever, you don't need to like die. But it definitely is sensitive to temperature. Like we have had it in probably not like 10 degrees, but a cooler space to a warmer space. And it takes a longer time for it to warm up. Sometimes it'll fail, whatever. So anyway, be gentle, be kind to it. That's all.
How does it function in like extreme temperatures?
How does it function?
Yeah.
How well?
Like how well does it function?
So thankfully, I have not tried it in the Arctic.
And what about like extreme like heat? So like in like 90+ degrees, like what's the work?
Honestly, I've not tried that. I always try to go to an air-conditioned space with a closed room. Ideally. In extreme heat, I would imagine that would still work to a certain degree. I don't know. That would be more of a question for River.
Humidity. Can you guys talk about the desiccant that's in it? It's like in high humid environments, it's super shit. So if we're using that side, like the desiccant that's in it is used to change. Like I mean, it's a machine to tell you, but maybe they sent you that yet.
We typically don't use it outside.
Yeah, we try to avoid outside at all costs. That is like the last piece.
But we're going to be on the ACDC call, which is an interesting group that you should join, and the festival people do stuff outside, so they would definitely know more. What are they called?
Dancing.
Dancing.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
they've been doing this for a while, and they do it like almost exclusively outside, so they should know more. I know they've set up a tent and stuff, but I'm not sure about the other specifics.
Anybody that has an FTI, it's just a wealth of knowledge, and like the only things, like these are questions that only can be asked of people that have been doing this for so long. And like I text Sam all the time, I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? You know? So it's really helpful.
Yeah, we'll be joining that call later today.
Alright. Next up, we will be talking about how to use fentanyl test strips, the FTIR basic how-to steps, and then filling out envelopes and sending them away. So first up is fentanyl test strips. Go back up.
Okay. That's okay. What happens usually, then there's a sample in the bag. If you have two people, the person who's running the FTIR can where'd my cup go? You can put the sample in the cup. I don't have any stuff, but pretend there's a sample in here, and you can write the number on here, so if you're doing multiple at a time, you don't get mixed up, oh, that's 7, oh, that's 4, what's happening. So, anyway, put a small amount sample in here. You should be able to see something. You don't need a ton. They're pretty sensitive, but put a little bit in there, and if it's on the sides, you put, put the little spout around the sides, and then in the middle, and try to mix it up. And be about 5 milliliters. Doesn't have to be exact. Sorry, I should be wearing gloves. Make sure you're wearing gloves. So you put the water in there and mix it up, kind of agitate it a little bit. Open the test strip with the little notches. There's directions on the outside too if you need them. Grab the strip by the blue end, not the end that my hand's on. This end, the blue end. And you submerge this to this solid blue line. If you go past it, you can get a false result, nothing will show up. If you see nothing, you probably submerged this too deeply. So you insert it into the water. At the 5 milliliter, you can kind of just let it sit there. But if you put more, you have to hold it. So this is exactly up to the blue line. You can watch if there's capillary action. So I don't know if you can see very well, but water is starting to move up this white part. And it'll go all the way up to this blue line. I usually take it out when I see the water moving and place it on top and wait and do other stuff. Make sure you don't hit it over. And you should wait a couple of minutes. The more there's a question, yes.
I was just going to ask about dilution for other products because
Yeah.
MDMA and methadone a lot more water, and I forgot how much it is.
Absolutely, yeah, that's all.
Cool. So this is for normal cocaine, heroin, whatever. You don't know. So this is for a while. The more you use, the more you can tell, but it's recommended to wait a while. And I'm sure you all can't see, but we'll pass this around. So when there's 2 lines negative, so it's opposite of, okay, 1 line's positive, 2 lines negative. If you think you see a second line, it's negative, okay? It really should be white. White, you can't see anything that's positive, okay? If this is positive, I would add 30 milliliters, which I can do just to show you, how you have to hold the strip. So we do 2 things, and Tracy can explain to you why sometimes you're interested in that. This is why we just do this as step practice. So when you do the 30, if you submerge it all the way, you're just gonna not get. I can show you that it's not gonna work. And then I'll show you properly how to do it. So you have to hold it up to the line, and wait. Maybe it's some pure water. I don't know, so you hold it, you stare at it, and you wait, mix it around, and the water starts coming up, just leave it on top. This is the one that I just shoved in. It's just like white. Can't see anything because I like went past the sun. Yeah, so that it just looks like nothing happened to it. Yeah, and so once it's doing that, you discard the water. We have the Terra bags. You can buy a lot of them. They'd love to sell them to you. This is what we use. I can give you my guy if you want. He loves to call me. Anyway, you pour this in. Then you can throw away the cup. Make sure this is closed. And then once you're done, like you can add more water and kind of shake it up. But this is a bag that deactivates drugs using activated carbon, rendering them inert. So yeah, this
A bunch of variation of how much to dilute it with as well, so
Yep.
that's why I asked, like, I've seen some people try to say like half a cup. And I was like, what?
That's two. Okay.
Yeah, I
There's
was
a lot
like, what?
We do the practice of 5 mils for everything at first, and if it comes back negative, diluting it more to 30, we'll just repeat it. If it's positive at 5, whether it's a false positive because of MDMA or it's positive because of fentanyl, we then dilute it again to 30. And if it's at 30 and it's MDMA, it'll come back negative.
Okay.
Ideally. And then second, if it's still fentanyl and you dilute it to 30, it'll still come back to positive.
Okay.
So that is our practice that seems to have worked so far.
yes.
How much did you hear?
Gosh, I don't know. We buy like a lot of them. Let me check. I buy like 200 or something. It depends. I'll take a look at my Instagram.
And another note on that, those to bags, this was just one for the purpose of our sampling. We can go to a site, do like 15 samples, and they will all be dumped in the same.
So yeah, you don't need one every time. You can use one per experience. If it's like full, you shouldn't like keep adding water to it. But if it's not full, if there's still room, you can keep going. You just need to be able to like do this at the end. So one per like event is fine.
Just a quick question, do you add water every sample you put in?
I have the test strip water, so like when we do the test strips,
okay.
yeah, we put the test strip water, and like if there's something, like if there's a leftover stuff in a bag, I'll just throw it in here so we don't put it in the regular trash. So like I don't necessarily add water because there's already water in there. But if you're just like, I have this one thing that I need to get rid of, you can put it in there and then you'll add water. Okay? Cool. Anything else? Great.
And this exact graphic was borrowed from BTNX. So if you ever need a refresher on how to exactly do that, sure. So cool. So I will do a brief demonstration on how to actually set up the FTIR. So first, you have it in this box.
If people want to crowd around, I imagine that's okay.
If you want, go through.
You can't see.
So, pick it up from the bottom. Typically, I like to point the backside towards the closest outlet for wherever you will be plugging in, just for ease of purpose. Yeah. Yeah, there's me. Oh, details. But just a power cord. Just plugs right in. I'm not actually gonna boot it up just for the sake of time. But power cord into the back. With a little hold cable switch to make sure that it won't fall out while you're testing. And then it takes typically about 15 minutes to warm up, depending on how cold it was and the last time you used it. But about 15 to 20 minutes. Yeah. Alright, go on. But also, you have this Ethernet cord, which was mentioned earlier. So, on the other side of the back of the instrument, click in the Ethernet port, then this will go into your computer with the Opus software on it. And whether you need an adapter to connect it like we do for the Surface Pros, just buy an HDMI to Ethernet adapter, and those work fine. So yeah. So once you have your cable set up, you let it sit for about 10-15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer to warm up. And then I like to preemptively clean the instrument with isopropyl. But also, I didn't even fully set up the instrument. Here's the program. So For those of you who have never like held an FTIR, if you want me to hands on it with you tomorrow to like assemble, just let me know. But pushing the anvil side of the instrument into the ball. So then take a bit of isopropanol that you have filled beforehand. You do not spray the isopropanol directly onto the machine. Spray it on the wipe down. And you will wipe down the instrument between every single sample that you run. Sometimes it gets crusty, which is really annoying, and then you have to, like I said, it's a pretty sturdy machine, so you can really like scrape with pressure on it to get the rust off.
If I'm gonna say that Nancy broke their like little crystal by trying to use the anvil to crush pills. So don't crush things with the anvil. Well, it makes sense. Kind of.
Yeah.
So
I think I would just need to be like a mortar pestle, like crush it up first and then like pour it on the crystal. That's good. That's good to know though.
So once you've done these first 3 steps, you have to do a QC test, which is in the Opus software, which I will talk about at a later point. You will then scan the background. You'll then load the sample. So pretend I have a little bit of this batch of sample. Put it directly on the crystal. Cover it completely is ideal. And then, for the ease of our purposes, all these little pre-cut up tinfoil hats you can place right on top of the sample. And this is just to help you save time. This will not interfere with your sample at all, will not give you a worse scan. It is just to save you time between samples. Because you place the tinfoil on top of the sample, and then move the anvil over and press down, the anvil will not get dirty. So this saves you a little bit. And then just throw away the tinfoil, put it in the air bag if there's a lot of crust on it. And once you bring the anvil down, there will be a little red circle on this side, and you want to center that within the larger circle. We can talk about this more in detail tomorrow, but I'm just going through it now. And once the red circle is in the center, you can press scan sample on the Opus software. Then, once you press scan sample, there will be another button on the bottom left that says start measurement, and then it will start recording that. And you can fiddle with the measurement settings, which I actually learned recently is important. For newly acquired groupers, they default to spectra below or above 330 centimeters inverse wave numbers, but you only want above 515, and I will get into that.
Can you show that as tomorrow?
Yes. I'll probably go through that today too.
And that will do what? It will help you get a better signal, or?
Yes, so if you have it below 515, like you're, so you know the spectra is 515 to like 4,000.
Yeah.
If you go like 515 to 350, this area is not picked up well.
Oh, you're talking about the noise of it there again?
Yes.
Yeah.
You need to just cut it out.
I thought you were
But then there is another way to improve the spectra.
Are you gonna talk about that thing that?
Yes, that is what this is.
Okay, cool.
But if you are just looking at the spectrum from 515 to 4,000 wave numbers, you will get a clean spectrum and be able to compare it to your libraries. But if you go from 515 to 330, which is what it defaults to, like it goes from 330 to 4,000, this low end is going to mess with your analysis, which is very, very annoying. And then another way you can mess with it is you can tell the instrument take longer and take more scans of a given sample, which will give you a clearer spectrum. So it can go as quickly as 20 seconds to give you a scan, but you can up it, I don't know the max limit, but about a minute, 40 seconds to a minute of measuring is sufficient to be able to clearly compare it to spectrums in the library.
Can you show them that tomorrow? So tomorrow during your
Yes.
demo, can you show that? Okay.
Absolutely. I'm just giving like a brief run through now, but this will be all in detail and shown through on the Opus software. Once you're done, once you hit start measurement and it produces your spectrum, you're like, hey, it's a nice spectrum. You will then unload it and press next sample, which is on the left side. But then you can move on to your next. You move the anvil up and over, clean the instrument again with the isopropanol on the pen wipe, and scan the background, move on, do it again, do it however many samples you need. So that is how it works. There will be a whole other walkthrough of this in Opus. That will be probably clearer than just me saying it in my brain. But that is typically how it works. Any questions now? I will again go through this in a lot more detail in Opus. But for now, that is that. And then the envelope form. So this is an example of a filled out envelope, which is here. So the drugs data sample ID code is what we have pre-filled out for every envelope that we make that matches the sample baggie to make sure that they always line up and go to DDL the same way, or in the same envelope. Our unique sample ID is typically the 2 or 3 letter code followed by the 4-number code. So for example, this one's Greenfield, so it's GR_8038. That was our number and letter combo. So those we were in here. The date it was acquired, the sample name it was either sold as or reported as, source location, what the appearance of the sample is. For example, this one's with crystal, but it could be tan powder, white powder, brown rock, white rock, so on and so forth. So whatever it is. There's another line down here for BTNX fentanyl test strip. They would prefer you to fill it out in advance. Say at 5 mils it was negative, or at 5 mils and 30 mils it was positive. So just writing a quick note down there will be helpful for them. Same with the benzo strips, but that is depending on what you're doing. And also, if you are able to analyze the sample before you send it to DDL, they would like to know what your FPIR results were in this line here. And then for our purposes, if we ever have a sample that is overdose related, we just write adverse health event to know to DDL that it's had a negative health event associated with it. And then in the future, as we'll get to later with street check as well, we hope that all of this information that is recorded on the sample bag and then transferred onto this form can be sent directly or viewed directly by DDL through the app. So hopefully they'll have like back permissions to see everything or see what we want them to see. So ideally, this form will kind of go away. You will just send sample in the bag, and they will know the code associated with the app. That is most likely. It's a pretty basic form. Nothing that won't be on the sample bag. And yeah.
Right, so we prepare those folders or whatever ourselves. Depending on what lab you work with, they'll probably have different specifications for you, but basically, Polaroid prints out that piece of paper, puts the sticker on it, puts the sticker on the small bag. So we like manually do it. I'm not sure what NMS like requests, but whatever your lab does, you know, do that. But this is what we have to do for UL.
Yep. What is that?
I see the parentheses, and I apologize, I stepped out where it says the parentheses for the analysis. So you buy in the groups, you purchase your tests, so that you're testing through the lab, the groups of 40 in this case.
No, I think that's the number of analysis that they do, or like up to that number that they can do on our sample. I'm not sure the specifications. They just put that on there for us. That's like the plan in quotes that we have with them. So they like gave us this sheet. And everything that's printed on that sheet is from them. So I think it depends on the agreement that you have with the places. But they do like reagent tests and other things besides the GCMS. So I think that's included in the 40 analysis. I'm not sure.
So it's 40 analyses per sample.
Mm-hmm.
So they, I don't know if that has to do with the GCMS settings, but it has to do per sample. This is for one sample. And I believe you can do more analyses to maybe get better information, or more detailed information. But 40 analyses is what we did. And that was also predetermined by every person. Does that make more sense? Hope that makes sense. Maybe a little bit. Maybe not.
It's good to take the code that and correlate to your own, so when they send back their results, you know that.
Exactly. So you write down this code when you are filling in your sample information in your own spreadsheets. Write down this code and your unique sample code so that you can make sure that they all match up. there are a lot of codes, and hopefully the app will remove some of them, where it should. But yes, definitely write down these codes, because otherwise you won't know the results. And this is kind of just more details of it. So, once filled out, take your form, fold it in half, put it in the envelope. And as I said, about 5 to 10 milligrams. If you're ever unsure, probably send closer to 10. But don't send like a whole bag of drugs.
It's frowned upon.
Yes, you will probably get yelled at if I heard. But about 2 5 milligram scoops into this bag, the small plastic bag into the black mylar bag. And we put all these stickers on, or Becca, at least in this batch, put all the stickers on ourselves so that hopefully they won't get tampered with in the mail. But
Right, so the lab that we work with, and I imagine any lab that you'll work with, if you're mailing them samples, should have an agreement with the DEA that allows them to mail illicit things through the mail. So like what we're doing is kosher, and I don't know if Cole's gonna talk about this later, but we have memorandums of understanding set up with each site that we work with. So if you end up heading to other locations, we have agreements with the local police departments that say like, yep, we're not gonna arrest you for doing this activity. So we try to stay in the town that we're in and use their mailboxes. And then once it's in the mail, like then it's okay. It's like there's an agreement there. So yeah.
And just a quick note, if you have a cooker, you put the cooker in a small bag, like I said, wrap in, bubble wrap, and then put it in the black mylar bag. Or if you have multiple, better to put it in a shipping box. In the future, it'll go right through pre-check, and you can just type in your phone in this wall, pre-populate, and have it all already done. But in the meantime, we have a large Excel sheet with a ton of columns for making note of everything we did to the sample. So, for example, that greenfield sample would go in the sample like this, GR_8038. Testing location, greenfield, or whatever it is. Sample origin, whatever community organization or police department it was through. So for greenfield, it was through Tapestry. Sample origin, despite it being in greenfield, quite a few other samples came from Holyoke, so it could be Holyoke, Greenfield, Northampton, could be any nearby towns in the town itself. Sample origin, if you have it or if it was provided to you, for example, Penny didn't want to give or receive it, or Sarah didn't want to say where it was from. So if you have an address across the street, you can write it here. If you don't, you can just leave it as unknown or blank.
Most people are.
Yeah, most people.
Yeah, we usually say like, did you get it around here? And then we say like Mountain Castle, which is like the area, but like people start to get a little like swirly. They're like, what street did you buy your drugs on?
Exactly.
Maybe like the neighborhood at least.
Yeah.
I assume.
Like sometimes people say downtown, they'll say like, W or whatever,
Or
like
like
general areas.
That's what I was thinking too, that we had like north and south and.
Exactly. But it's more information, so it can go in this sample origin. Suspected active is what it was provided as, dope, fentanyl, heroin, etc. For police departments, an incident, whether it was a controlled buy, an overdose, so on and so forth. Any user experience notes will be put here. The data collection, so depending on how you have yours set up, your data collection will not be the same necessarily as the data test. So for Lynn, for example, we go there once every month so we'll have some data collection samples from like a month or more ago, but the data test is actually the day that we're doing the testing of all these given samples. Sample packaging, baggie, wax hold, con cooker, etc. Sample appearance, white, tan, powder, so on and so forth. The result of the fentanyl test strip, which can be negative, positive at 5, negative at 30, or positive at 5 and positive at 30. Or if you do any other different additions, you can make up here. We do pH, so we just write whatever the pH strip came out to be, 7 or 8. And then whether or not the FTIR was used for this particular sample, which is yes or no in this column, and then data test. So this is all the information that is input early on into the sample analysis process.
Sorry, Cole, the pH strip, what does that mean?
Yes. So pH strip. We also do pH testing of all of our samples when they're in the little plastic cups with fentanyl test strips. And
Unclear why.
Yeah, why?
We were asked to see if fentanyl or different substances like change the pH. We haven't seen anything change the pH. It's just, Tracy had a research question, so we tried to answer it. But you don't need to do them. They're pretty cheap, but I wouldn't say that it adds a lot of information.
Well, do you think, is it something, practically, if Tracy wants to do it, I assume there's some reason for it, so, if you inject it...
You can ask her.
if you inject something that's high pH, does that have any kind of, effect?
Yeah, we had a guy that got a bag of baking soda and he has stage 3 kidney failure.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say,
So, you know what? Maybe it might be a utility.
They're pretty cheap.
We don't do it, but
So you should
maybe
just,
I do
if
want
you're
to.
interested in that question, and Tracy hopefully will be back later and you can ask her the specifics.
I'll text her.
But basically she asked us to do it, so we bought them. And they last a really long time. It's sort of difficult to tell the difference between 7 and 8, but 7 and 8 is pretty close enough.
We find out maybe
Yeah.
something weird interacting with something else too.
Yeah. Well, because then, what would be the difference if people, inject, I know there's, it's not just pure baking soda, but, crack has...
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Because baking soda is very basic, right? Yeah. So I'm assuming that if it's in a high enough quantity, it's throwing off pH.
Yeah,
that
usually
makes
added
sense.
right.
Yeah.
So now I'm super shit.
That's when you do that, vaccinating. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Sorry.
so that is that. And then the Arrowwood sample ID is that bag with the number code that's pasted on beforehand to keep everything straight, which, as Kenny said, is very important to write down so you can keep track of your samples. So, Arrowwood sample ID goes right there. There's a column for GCMS results, which will stay blank until you receive those back. DDL also gives reported ratios. I think NMS Labs does as well, but different confirmatory testing will give back different formats of what they are able to tell you and what they will tell you. And then these columns. So first, this most probable results for inactive cuts and impurities are what I see as cuts on the FTIR, which are typically different types of sugars, which the GCMS is not good at telling you, which I will explain later. But that is one reason to complement GCMS testing with FTIR testing, is GCMS is very, very bad at telling you if there's sugars in it or what type of sugars. So the purpose of the FTIR is very good at telling us. Most probable results are your initial results from the FTIR. So if I see cocaine on the FTIR, I'll say cocaine. But the chance that there's something in a smaller quantity that's also in that sample that will be picked up by GCMS will then be reported in the GCMS results, and then we update the results based on what we see from confirmatory testing. Any general notes we have about the sample? Notes high level are from our clinical toxicologist Rachel, who provides notes on the results updated column and how they can impact individuals who use these substances and in these ratios. Notes simplified are kind of for more reporting back to individuals who use the substances, because this could be very, as it says, high level, very intense, and then this could be better for reporting back. And then any occupational implications, because I know this was talked about quite a bit, especially when fentanyl was first coming out, but if you touch it, you can overdose. So the occupational implications of any of the active components, Rachel will report on and let us know if there's any hazards that we be preventative and be safe about. For the most part, everything is safe, especially for gloves and a mask. I've never, or I can't imagine there being any problem with easy without gloves and a mask. So that is going from the sample bag to that. And then for
It's like I check Cheetos, I just like,
Yeah, it's kind of like how I feel, I'm like, oh, yeah.
there's a meth and cocaine like all over my pants.
Yeah.
Wait, my streets in the garage.
I was gonna say, I was like, you know how many times I've found little bits of like chore just like in my car somewhere?
In my jeans,
I'm like, how did you get out of the bag? It just ended up. It's not mine, it's everywhere.
So this spreadsheet is what we keep internally with all of our information, probably more information than our production organizations will need typically. So this is how we will report back to our production organizations that we work with. Sample ID, sample summary is typically the most important because it'll say that inactive cuts, the active cuts, what they are, and kind of like overall, this is what was in the sample. What it was dropped off as is the expected active, location, data was dropped off, user experience notes. And then fentanyl test scripts. For our note taking, if it's negative at 5, we just write negative. You can write negative at 5 mils. And if it's just positive, that indicates for us that it's positive at 5 and at 30. If it's positive at 5 and negative at 30, that will say positive at 5, negative at 30. But none of those here. So these had these are the cuts and impurities that were identified on the FTIR. When I say none identified, that means that there were none identified. So for example, these cocaine and crack samples, I saw no cuts in them. So
Did you give me the address of that?
Yeah, I was like, where is that? I was like, Greenfield, Mass. All right.
Who wants to take a look?
Yeah.
and then the active components, I will initially fill this column out with the preliminary active components that I saw. So if I just saw cocaine on the FTIR spectrum, I'll put just cocaine here. Or if it's fentanyl or an analog, I'll write fentanyl/analog. So, but then once we get the confirmatory test results, I then update this and just put those there, just kind of overlap. Because typically, if I saw just cocaine, I'll write cocaine, but now it's cocaine benzene. Thankfully, drugs data has all the results completely public, so I just post a link to this given sample here so that if the harm reduction organization wants to click on it, they're more than welcome to look more details, more of the test, and more of the information. But kind of the shorthand notes are available on this. The clinical notes are those notes talked about by Rachel, kind of gives physiological effects of the given actives. And then compound alerts are something that we do to report back samples. So we saw at least 2 of these samples had phenacetin in the cocaine samples. And as Becca was mentioning earlier, phenacetin has this unintended cancer effect later. So we make a note of any compounds that are especially noteworthy. And then also this one, we got a xylazine compound alert as well, because it has been an increased cut as a rule. So this is typically what our harm reduction organizations will see. Any questions?
Are we gonna go over like today or tomorrow, what are the symptoms? Because like I've never interacted with this tool before, of like what exactly you can test with it. Because I have a bunch of like silly basic questions.
On the FTIR? Sure. Yeah. That will be more. There's a slide that says what you can see on the FTIR, what you can.
That's so big. It was like, let me ask first.
We will go through that. Any other questions?
With the pH testing, have you guys noticed any changes with anything that has a xylazine cut in it?
No. Part of my other concern with pH testing is we diluted, so even diluting it to 5 milliliters might be diluting it too much to actually see an effect of xylazine. We might just be getting the pH of the water that we're testing. And the xylazine is not in high enough concentration to actually affect it. So that might be something we want to do is like put a little bit like 1 mil, like a 1 milligram, 1 mil, and then do the pH of that. That could be something we want to pursue further. So far, basically everything we've seen is separate. So that is pretty much. So this will be talked about later, but I will start it now. So as you saw, there are a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of codes to keep track of, and it can be very confusing, and there are always mistakes that are made between that and I. So one reason that we have Laura pursuing this app is for a standardization and improvement in the sample collection for community partners. It should make them easier to filling out these bags. It should be quicker, easier, and just better. So improve the quality of the drug checking. It'll improve the speed and accuracy, reduce the possibility of cross-contamination, and it'll make more time to focus on connecting with people. And particularly, getting more of that user info experience is so helpful. And then reporting back the results should be easier through the app as well. So we can. I think that's some of the data collection in the future of where we're looking to go from this horrific spreadsheet to a nice app. But,